Fred Brown was the original long-range shooter, hitting shots at a long distance before the three-point line was ever implemented, and once it was, he would lead the league as its best shooter from behind the arc. Throughout Fred Brown's career, he would get hot in a hurry, whether that was when he was an all-star or the sixth man on a championship team. This is a look back on Fred Brown's career. Fred Brown was born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where he played basketball for Lincoln High School, and during this time, Brown would get his nickname Downtown Freddie Brown. That would stick for the rest of his career, for his innate ability to knock down long-range shots. On top of being a deep threat at Lincoln, he helped guide the team to 2 state championships while there, garnering the interest of colleges. However, Brown couldn't qualify academically to play basketball at the Division I level, so he would go on to play for Southeastern Community College to improve his grades and play ball. Fred Brown would spend 2 years at Southeastern destroying his competition. Meanwhile, Iowa was keeping tabs on him throughout, making Brown a priority. As a result, Fred Brown would transfer to Iowa for his final 2 years of eligibility, and in his 2 years at Iowa, he helped the team become Big Ten regular season champs and make the NCAA tournament, while also becoming an All-American his senior year, where he would average 27.6 points and 4.6 rebounds, drawing interest of the NBA and the ABA after his senior year. In the 1971 NBA draft, Fred Brown would be selected 6th overall to the Seattle SuperSonics. Fred Brown was joining a Seattle team that was led by Spencer Haywood, Dick Snyder, and Lenny Wilkens. Now, with Snyder and Wilkens holding down the guard positions, Fred Brown would find himself struggling to see court time his rookie year, despite being a high draft pick. So Brown would only play in 33 games, where he would average 4.2 points, 1.8 assists, and 1.1 rebounds. All the while, the Sonics would play well, going 47-35, but missed the playoffs. In the offseason, the Sonics would decide to trade away an aging Lenny Wilkens to the Cleveland Cavaliers, helping create playing time for Fred Brown. Now, Fred Brown was now playing in a full-time role in Seattle, seeing his numbers increase as a result to 13.5 points, 5.5 assists, and 4 rebounds. But despite Fred Brown's improvement this season, the Sonics did not look the same without Wilkens' veteran leadership, going 26-56, missing the playoffs. Next season, Fred Brown would continue to develop his game and improve, becoming the third man on the team, increasing his output to 16.5 points, 5 assists, and 4.9 rebounds. Yet again, though, the Sonics struggled, going 36-46, missing the playoffs. In the offseason, the Sonics would decide to shake things up after the disappointing year, trading away Dick Snyder's to the Cavs for a future pick. As a result, Fred Brown was going to get more touches, in which he would not disappoint, averaging 21 points, 4.2 rebounds, 3.5 assists, and being 5th in the league in steals that year at 2.3. With Fred Brown playing a bigger role in the offense this season, the Sonics would improve, going 43-39, making the playoffs as a 4 seed, getting a round 1 matchup against the Pistons with Bob Lanier and Dave Bing. Fred Brown would get hot against the Pistons, being the leading scorer twice with 30 points and 23 points in separate games, helping the Sonics advance 2-1 to round 2. In round 2, the Sonics would get the number 1 seeded Golden State Warriors, who were led by Rick Barry and Jamal Wilkes. The series would be gridlocked after 4 games thanks to Fred Brown's 37-point Game 4 tying the series up. Game 5 and 6, though, would be all Warriors, though, with Jamal Wilkes and Rick Barry taking care of the Sonics rather easily, advancing 4-2, where the Warriors would go on to win the NBA championship this season. In Fred Brown's first playoff experience, he would average 20.6 points, 2.9 assists, and 4.5 rebounds. In the offseason, the Sonics would decide to trade away Spencer Haywood to the Knicks, making the team completely Fred Brown's now. Brown would go on to be the 5th leading scorer in the NBA this season as a result, with 23.1 points a night to go along with 2.7 assists and 4.2 rebounds, seeing Fred Brown earn his first All-Star appearance, where he would be playing well and score 14 points in the game. All the while, Fred Brown would lead the Sonics back to the playoffs despite losing Haywood in the offseason, going 43-39, getting a 2 seed, in a matchup with the Phoenix Suns headed by Alvin Adams and Paul Westphal. Fred Brown would elevate his level of play this series, even seeing himself score 45 points in Game 2, but Fred Brown alone could only do so much, as the Suns proved to be a deeper team that was hot at the right time, sending the Sonics home in 6 games. Fred Brown would lead the league in scoring in the playoffs with 28.5 points, as well as averaging 4.7 rebounds and 2.8 assists. In the offseason, the Sonics would find a steal in the NBA draft at the 29th pick in selecting Dennis Johnson, who would help improve the team tremendously in the long term. Now, many expected Fred Brown entering the next season to maintain his level of play from the prior year, but the offense was no longer strictly being run through him alone, seeing his numbers dip to 17.2 points, 3.2 rebounds, and 2.4 assists, where the Sonics would follow suit, seeing their record dip to 40 and 42, missing the playoffs. In the offseason, the Sonics would make big moves improving the team as a result, with drafting Jack Sigma and signing Gus Williams in free agency. Surprisingly, the Sonics would start off the year floundering and would fire their head coach after going 5-17 to start the season, and they would go on to hire Lenny Wilkens to replace him, who would shake the team up. Wilkens would move Fred Brown to the bench as the sixth-man role, letting Johnson and Williams be the starters, and with Fred Brown getting the new role as an instant offense off the bench, he would be excelling in it in the situation most might not. Brown on the year would average 16.6 points, 2.6 rebounds, and 3.3 assists. With the Lenny Wilkens takeover and the playing time adjustments by the Sonics, they would get hot, going 47 and 35, making the playoffs, stunning the NBA world considering how poorly they started the season. In round 1, the Sonics would get a matchup against the Los Angeles Lakers with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Adrian Dantley leading them. The Lakers definitely had the best player in Jabbar, who would play great the entire series. The Sonics, on the other hand, had the better team and advanced to the next round 2-1, where the one-seeded Trailblazers were awaiting them with Bill Walton, Lionel Hollins, and Maurice Lucas. The series seemed to be in favor of the Blazers, but Bill Walton would pick up an injury in Game 2, having to miss the rest of the series. With Walton out, the Sonics would capitalize on the opportunity, winning the series 4-2. In the Western Conference Finals, the Sonics would meet the Denver Nuggets, who had Dan Issel and David Thompson leading them. Both of them would provide problems for the Sonics throughout the series, but on the other side of the things, the Nuggets couldn't seem to slow down the Sonics' offense, which had multiple threats, and in Game 6, Fred Brown would get hot, leading the lay with 26 points, sending the Sonics into the NBA Finals. In the NBA Finals, the Sonics would face another team who were hot at the right time in the Washington Bullets, with Wes Unseld, Bob Dandridge, and Elvin Hayes. The series would alternate games with both teams being matched up evenly, with Fred Brown helping the Sonics pick up 2 big games, leading them in scoring twice with a 30-point and 26-point game. The series would ultimately come down to the 7th game, and the game would be close to start, but the Bullets would pull away in the second and third quarter. Seattle would rally, but it was a little too late, as the Bullets would go on to win the NBA championship 105-99. Over the run to the NBA Finals, Fred Brown averaged 17.3 points, 2.4 assists, and 2.1 rebounds. The Sonics would enter next season hungry and confident to avenge the loss in the finals. The Sonics would have no slow start this go-around and would thrive, going 52-30, being the number 1 seed. During the year, Fred Brown in his 6-man role averaged 14 points, 3.4 assists, and 2.2 rebounds. In the playoffs, the Sonics would get the Lakers again to start. Now, the Lakers were getting better now, with Norm Nixon and Jamal Wilkes stepping up their play to go along with Jabbar and Dantley from the other year. There would be multiple close games throughout, but Gus Williams was hitting big shot after big shot, having huge performances, helping send the Lakers home 4-1. In the Western Conference Finals, the Sonics would meet the Phoenix Suns, who now had Walter Davis and Truck Robinson to go along with Paul Westphal and Alvin Adams. The Sonics would jump out to a 2-0 lead in the series, seeming to have control of it. Things would switch all of a sudden, with the Suns seeming to find a new light, winning the next 3 games, going up 3-2 thanks to Westphal and Davis's big performances. In Game 6, the Sonics would be trailing in the fourth quarter at one point by 8 points, but would rally, taking the lead by 1 with 52 seconds left, holding on to a victory and forcing Game 7. Game 7 would be all Jack Sigmas, as he would have his way against the Suns, helping the Sonics make it back to the NBA Finals, where yet again they would be facing the Washington Bullets. The Sonics would drop Game 1 after a slow start hurt them, but going forward the team seemed to have vengeance on their minds, rallying off the next 4 games with big performances from Gus Williams and Dennis Johnson. The Seattle SuperSonics and Fred Brown were now NBA champions. Over the run to a ring, Fred Brown averaged 8.4 points and 2.1 assists. Entering next season, the NBA would add the 3-point line, much to the delight of downtown Freddie Brown. Brown would lead the league in three-point field goal percentage this season with 44.3%, helping Brown average 12 points to go along with 2.2 assists and 1.9 rebounds. The Sonics, trying to defend their crown, would go on to go 56-26, making the playoffs as a 3 seed, getting a matchup against Calvin Nat and the Portland Trail Blazers in round 1. The best of 3 series was all about home court advantage, with Seattle being the higher seed and Gus Williams leading them to a 2-1 victory. Next round, the Seattle SuperSonics would play the Milwaukee Bucks, led by Marcus Johnson, Brian Winters, Junior Bridgman, Sidney Moncrief, and Bob Lanier. The series would be close throughout in large parts because Bob Lanier was winning the one-on-one battle against Sigma, helping the Bucks jump out to a 3-2 lead in the series. Game 6 would be close as well, where the Sonics would hold on to the lead late to beat the Bucks thanks to a jump shot by Fred Brown, winning the game 86-85. Game 7 would be another tight one, but Gus Williams would get hot again, helping push the Sonics over the top into the next round, where they would play the Los Angeles Lakers again in the playoffs for the 3rd year in a row. But this time was different because the Lakers had Magic Johnson on the team now as a rookie to help Kareem. Now Seattle would steal a game 1 behind 34-point performance by Fred Brown, but would fail to win another game this series with Jabbar, Magic, and Wilkes overwhelming the Sonics. The Lakers would go on to win the NBA championship after defeating the Sonics. Over the postseason run, Fred Brown averaged 12.5 points, 2.5 rebounds, and 2.1 assists. In the offseason, Dennis Johnson would get traded away to the Phoenix Suns for Paul Westphal because Johnson had started to butt heads with Lenny Wilkens, which was an okay move when Westphal was healthy, but he would end up missing significant time this year. On top of that, Seattle would be without Gus Williams, who sat out the entire year due to a contract dispute. With Williams and Johnson gone, Brown would play a larger role in the offense again, averaging 15.5 points, 3 assists, and 2.2 rebounds. Brown alone, though, at the guard position was not enough to make up for Williams and Johnson and an injured Westphal at times, seeing the Sonics go 34-48, missing the playoffs. In the offseason, Paul Westphal would leave in free agency, but the Sonics had reached an agreement with Gus Williams, who was back on the team for next season. Henceforth, Brown was back to playing a smaller role, where he would average 11.2 points, 2.9 assists, and 1.7 rebounds. With Gus Williams back, though, the Sonics were in the playoffs, finishing the year 52-30. In round 1, the Sonics would play the Houston Rockets with Moses Malone and Elvin Hayes. The Rockets and Sonics would split the first 2 games, with Malone wreaking havoc. In a do-or-die game 3, though, Jack Sigma would answer the call and look like the best big on the court, helping the Sonics advance 2-1. In round 2, the Sonics got the San Antonio Spurs with George Gervin, Johnny Moore, and Mike Mitchell. Several games into the series would be close, but when it mattered most, Gervin would take over the games, guiding the San Antonio Spurs to a 4-1 series victory. Over the postseason, Fred Brown averaged 11.9 points, 1.9 rebounds, and 2.3 assists. After the defeat to the Spurs, the Sonics knew they needed another weapon, so they would go out and trade for David Thompson. With Thompson on the team, age catching up to Fred Brown, his playing time would start to slide, but his numbers were still close to the same in 10.2 points, 3 assists, and 1.2 rebounds. The Sonics on the year did not look much better though than last, going 48-34 getting into the playoffs to face the Portland Trail Blazers with Calvin Nat, Michael Thompson, and Jim Paxson. Gus Williams again would elevate his play in the playoffs, but the rest of the Sonics players would just have an average series to below average, and the Blazers seemed to be improving upon their regular season form, defeating the Sonics 2-0. In this series, Fred Brown struggled, averaging 3 points and 2.5 assists. The Sonics were busy in the offseason again and would go out and acquire Tom Chambers in a trade. For Fred Brown, this next year would see him play the least amount of minutes he had played since his rookie year, with age playing a factor. But with the time he did get, he was still an effective bench player, averaging 8.5 points and 2.7 assists, helping the underwhelming Sonics go 42-40 getting into the playoffs, as well as getting a matchup against Mark Aguirre, Rolando Blackman, and the Mavericks. The series would have multiple close games, but the Mavericks had seemed to be slowing down Tom Chambers this series outside of a big Game 2 performance. As a result, the series would go down to a do-or-die Game 5, which funny enough would be played at SMU's basketball arena because of a scheduling issue with the tennis championship being in Dallas's Normal Arena. Game 5 would be close, and Williams would bring the team back into the game late, but the Mavericks and Rolando Blackman would ultimately hold on to win the game, sending the Sonics home. For the series, Fred Brown averaged 9.8 points and 2 assists, and after the year was over, Fred Brown knew it was time to hang them up and would retire. Over Fred Brown's 13-year career, he averaged 14.6 points, 2.7 rebounds, and 3.3 assists. Fred Brown would go on to get his number retired by the Seattle SuperSonics for his contributions in helping them win a championship and being a fan favorite within the community. Fred Brown will be remembered as a long-range shooter ahead of his time, shooting from three-point range before the three-pointer was ever even a thing, eventually leading the league in it once it was implemented. Being a hot hand when he was called upon, whether it was when he was starting as an all-star caliber player or coming off the bench as a sixth man on a championship-winning team, having the chance to be one of the few players to spend his whole entire career with one organization. Downtown Freddie Brown was a threat from anywhere and everywhere on the court. Thanks for watching this video on Fred Brown's career, and if you want to see any other future videos about any other random players, leave them in the comments below, and I may or may not decide to do a video on them. Thanks again for watching. This has been Skid Denver.